Hey, what's going on, guys? On today's episode of BBQ Talk, we are going to be discussing, do you need to be spritzing your briskets? So the short answer to that question is really, no, you really don't have to. So even though I say no, you don't have to spritz, let's just talk about in what situations I would have it on hand. If I notice that, hey, maybe my temps kind of spiked up, I threw in a log that just got really hot too fast, and I walked away from the pit and it's been at a little bit higher temp for longer than I would like to, and I just might go in there, open up the pit door, give everything a little spritz on the edges just to make sure that nothing doesn't continue to char up and get too dry. With that same thought, if you are someone who's maybe you're trying to change your cooking style, instead of doing a low and slow, you're doing a hot and fast, then yeah, I would say probably doing if you're doing hot and fast, adding more moisture throughout the cook on the surface of the brisket might not necessarily be a bad option either. So one of the reasons why I tend to, I don't like doing a bunch of spritzing, whether I am doing ribs or briskets and things like that, is one, if you're doing a brisket, you're trying to get rid of a lot of moisture, and it just kind of seems counterintuitive to add more on top of it. But with that being said, you are still trying to make sure that it doesn't go too far, it doesn't get too crusty, it doesn't get dried out. But a lot of that also has to do with, again, I'm a big proponent of having a really good trim. If you have a really good trim, it fixes a lot of issues in your cook. But if you do have certain parts where it's maybe a little bit thinner, maybe something's sticking out a little bit, then yeah, having a spritz on will kind of help prevent it from getting too charred and too dry. Another time that I might use it is if I'm getting close to a time when I'm ready to wrap, but I still want to render out some of that fat a little bit more. I might go in there and give the briskets a really good spritz because I want to bump up that temperature in the last like 15 to 20 minutes or so to help render out that last bit of fat before I go into wrap. Again, just because I'm worried that I don't want to push I don't want to push it too far and have it dry out at the very end of the cook, so I might give it a little light spritz to kind of save it just a little bit. So for those of you guys who haven't seen my my brisket cook video, I'll leave it in the link in the top corner so you can check that out as well. So the other question might be, maybe you're not spritzing, but you might be thinking about doing some mopping, because you see that a lot in Carolina stuff. If you guys have seen how they base their chickens and pork steaks at Snow's, they use a basting sauce or a mop sauce or something like that instead of a spritz. And so the question might be is, when do you decide to use a spritz or spray bottle, or when do you just use a bucket of liquid and a mop? To me, it's just a matter of what you're using and what type of liquid you're trying to add to whatever you're cooking. This is kind of my rule of thumb, is if you're using any liquid that might clog your spritz bottle, if you have any spices or have any solid objects in there to maybe, or you have some sauce that has ketchup in there that's a little bit thicker, then you probably don't want to put it in your spritz bottle, just because it's going to clog it up. You're not really going to get all the flavors that you want from it. So if you're going to be using a spritz bottle, I would keep it at a very minimum of what things that you add in there. Some people will use apple cider vinegar is a big one. Some people use apple juice. I think beers work good too if you want to do something like that. But in general, in most cases, when you're using a spritz, you're really not getting as much flavor as you would if you would just put in a mop sauce, because instead of it just spraying everything a really thin layer, you can actually get a really nice coating if you use a mop sauce. So the other rule for using a mop is, like we said, we want to be able to build a nice texture and a crust usually on all of our food that we're cooking. So using a mop really early on in the cook is probably not the best idea. You really want to be able to build a good crust on that meat itself first and then start to apply it, especially if you got something that has a little bit more sugar in it. You don't want those sugars to burn really early on in the cook, and then you start kind of getting acrid burnt flavors. So if you are adding liquids and stuff like that to your meats, just make sure that you're kind of getting it past that halfway marker to maybe the last third or quarter of your cook, where you can start to add in those different flavors where they start to caramelize instead of burn. So I hope that helps you guys out. For those of you who are trying to decide how much you should spritz, when you should spritz, all that kind of stuff, it really just depends on, one, what type of liquid you're using, just being mindful of why you're spritzing and what parts of your cook you're doing it. Don't just do it every hour because you saw it on someone else's video or you read some blog, because every single time you open up your smoker door, you're letting heat out, you're slowing down the cook. So if you go in spritz every hour, you're gonna end up extending your cook time a lot longer. So we wanna make sure that we just can keep that door closed, have a good idea of what our meat is actually doing, and go in there and spritzing when we think it might need it, and not just doing it just because some timesheet said so. I hope I gave you some information that you can use. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, subscribe, share this video with other people that might need this info. If you guys have any other questions that you want me to answer, leave them in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.